The third chapter is, of course, the chapter of the temptation and fall. And what we have here is there is a tree that's placed in the middle of the garden. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Yahweh forbids, in chapter 2, forbids the man to eat from this tree. In chapter 3, we're introduced to a new character, the serpent, and the serpent seeks to persuade Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Eve responds in a fairly pious way. She says, verse 2, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden. Neither shall you touch it, lest you die." And the serpent and Eve back that around back and forth, and they discuss and they argue and they disagree for a while. And finally, Eve reasons things out and makes her decision. She says, verse 6, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons." Now, we're going to go into the consequences of this decision in a few moments, but let's reflect on the narrative that I have just reviewed with you. And we can, in fact, interpret this narrative in two distinct ways. We can interpret this narrative as saying that the woman is at fault. Now, why would the woman be at fault? Well, the most famous formulation of this one would find in the writings of St. Paul, and he, in fact, is drawing from rabbinic writings that are contemporary with him, and it's that sin came into the world through Eve. And here we have introduced one of the very, very significant, influential, and frequently referred to themes about women in the Hebrew Bible. That is, women are dangerous. Women are a source of sin. Women are temptresses. Women are the ones who draw men into sin. Women are the cause of all the troubles in the world. You've heard the story of Pandora, also a woman, who opens up a box that the gods told her not to open, and out of that box spring forth all of the evil demons that cause war and pestilence and disease and suffering. It's all the woman's fault. In the Pandora story, it's because of the woman's curiosity. In the Garden of Eden story, when interpreted this way, it's because of the woman's weakness. We have kind of an interesting contradictory notion that's introduced in here. One is that women are weak. That when the serpent wanted to reach into the first family, he didn't go through the man because the man would have been stronger, but rather he went through the woman. The woman is weak. But the contrary notion, which is also contained within this larger category of the woman at fault, the contrary notion is that the woman is dangerous, not because she's weak, but because she's subject to the kinds of evil impulses. So she gives in to sin, as understood in this interpretation, and then she draws her husband into sin after her. And this is probably one of the strongest and most frequently used themes about women in the Bible. That is that women, by virtue of their weakness, and women by virtue of their wickedness or sinfulness, are the source of all of man's troubles. I just might add in passing that this is the explanation among many examples of why in Arab cultures, in many Arab Islamic cultures, women are supposed to keep themselves covered up. It's because women, when left to their own devices, are always going to draw men into sin. And this is an image we are going to see repeatedly visited within the Hebrew Bible, where women are regarded as dangerous. Women are regarded as a force that drags men into sin. However, this is not the only way that we can interpret this passage, because we have a whole other set of possibilities here, some of which I want to explore right now, others of which we'll talk about in class. A few things I want us to reflect upon as we consider this story. The most obvious one is, where was Adam? It seems that Adam was there all the time. The only reason I'm saying that is because as soon as she eats, it says she took of its fruit and ate, the end of verse 6. She also gave some to her husband, and he ate. There doesn't seem to be any kind of a time differential between the time that Eve ate the fruit and the time that Adam ate the fruit. It's Eve who reasons with the serpent. It's Eve who talks to the serpent. It's Eve who seems to have the greater sense and awareness, and Adam just kind of in a passive way, he goes along with that which Eve has already said. So if we're building some kind of a hierarchy here, we have to think that Eve seems to be the one who has the most intelligence, the most rationality, the most ability to reason through things and come up with her own decisions. One of the things I don't really have time to cover on this tape, but I'd like us to consider in class, is was what Eve did so bad? Eve looks at the tree, she looks at the fruit, and she weighs the benefits and the liabilities. She sees that the fruit is beautiful to look at, it's good to eat, and it's able to make one wise. She makes the decision, and she does it, and Adam goes along with her. Now, we see a lot of the bad consequences that occur because she disobeyed Yahweh's command and ate the fruit, but she's given the wisdom, the knowledge of good and evil, which is what appears to be resident in the fruit. And this is what brings humanity into its adolescence out of its childhood. So Eve becomes the mother of all living, not just by virtue of her biological motherhood, but by her virtue of bringing the human race out of the Garden of Eden and living the life that ultimately humans are destined to live. But where was Eve? Where was Adam? Why didn't Adam say anything? Why was it all put on Eve? There is a different way that we can in fact interpret this, as you can see.